Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I think it works, yeah. So I'm originally a Dutch engineer. I used to work for many years for engineering companies, constructing, actually, funny enough, also a lot of data centers around the planet. So I still part-time do this as a job. I also, aside from this company, Trollrensics, I also work for an engineering company called Royal Haskoning DHV. And we do a lot of data centers. And the link with data centers here is that we host our platform also in the cloud, in a data center somewhere in Europe, or when a client decides to have it somewhere. So that's also an interesting link to data centers. I worked for many years in Ukraine and Russia, started during Orange Revolution in Ukraine, 2004. And I very much liked the Ukrainian people. I saw a lot of Russian propaganda, maybe not yet in 2004, but that became really terrible in 2014, like 10 years ago. I was based in Moscow, and what I noticed was not only like newspapers, like TASS or Russia Today, these kinds of channels, switched massively. That was during the Maidan protests. Switched massively to disinfo on TV and in newspapers, but I also noticed that there were a lot of troll farms on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, these kinds of channels. And I started very simple at first, like, I don't know, look at some profile picture, do reverse image search, see if it's the real person. And what you would see is that these profile pictures were often stolen. You could do a sort of network analysis. I used to do that in Excel, see if they followed each other, pushed the same messages, this kind of stuff. Very simple stuff. But I probably was one of the pioneers in doing research on these troll farms. And I found a lot of them, including this, which is very famous, this internet research agency in St. Petersburg. At some point, Twitter published a lot of these trolls, but I already had quite a lot of them before Twitter did that. 6 years or 8 years ago, people laughed at me. I like disinfo, it doesn't matter, a few lies here and there. It makes no sense to take it really seriously. That really changed, not only because of this war now, but also because of COVID. I mean, everybody sees stuff like, I don't know, we'll all die in 2 years, this kind of stuff. So suddenly, COVID was like the push for our company to suddenly find a lot of clients interested in big data analysis on different social media platforms. This is probably one of the most brilliant reports ever written. It's an Oxford study, and they showed that in 2017, you had these organized campaigns. So we're looking at like large armies, a lot of accounts pushing some sort of disinfo. They found them in 28 countries. So the number of these, whatever they were doing, is higher, but the number of countries is 28, rose to 48 in 2018, to 70 in 2019, and in 2020, 81 countries. Well, at some point they will stop because we'll run out of countries at some point, but it does really show that the problem is getting bigger. And the two main drivers behind this are, A, you see this, it's a sort of inspiration, this internet research agency in St. Petersburg, but also the American MAGA trolls that was very popular. Those were the two main drivers. Well, in the end, sometimes I do look at like one account or two accounts pushing something, but I'm more interested in these huge campaigns. I don't know, Chinese government pushing massively with hundreds of people in big buildings. They all have some, I don't know, 10, 20 accounts, and they push this kind of disinfo. But there wasn't really software to do this, but I knew a lot how to do this by hand. And then I talked to a friend of mine who's a very brilliant ICT expert, and we at some point started building a lot of software specifically to locate trolls. So if somebody says, I want to find all these troll armies in a certain country, we go in basically blank. We did that recently for NATO. The country was Lithuania. And then we look at different platforms. So we have Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Reddit, a lot of different platforms where we collect large amounts of data. So to give you an example, some of the projects that we've done is like, I don't know, 10 million tweets on Twitter, or I don't know, 30,000, 200,000 tweets on TikTok, something like that. When we started, we didn't want to invent the wheel, so we started talking to a lot of different companies, and it turned out that they were very good often, whatever existed, in collecting data, but they were not so good at analyzing it. And I mean, if you have 9 million tweets, a lot of people have no clue where to start. So we really focused on large data sets and doing the analysis quickly. So like maybe in a day, you don't want to, I don't know, look at this info during elections and then like 3 months after elections, you can tell your citizens like what crap has been pushed on Facebook, which is all fake. You want to do it before the actual elections started. So that was our focus. So the technology looks like this schematically. So we have below in the red block, we have scraper farms. So that's all the platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. We all feed it into a data warehouse. So it's all hosted in a cloud platform. Then you have your own analyst. The system has a lot of pre-programmed visualizations, but you can use different programming languages. We use a Kibana platform, so you can make a lot of these visualizations with Kibana, but we also use programming languages like R and Python, etc. So you can, people can use it when they're like I don't know, a journalist, but they don't have an ICT background, or you can use very heavy ICT experts who are like, I don't know, the champion on Python programming, for instance. And what makes it interesting, I think, what we did is a lot of tools work directly on a certain platform. So you have some tool somewhere online, and you can use it on Twitter or on Instagram or whatever. But it's often unreliable, or the platform changes, it doesn't work anymore, or you have to register, you have no clue what happens with your data. So our tools only work on the database itself, which makes it possible to start the same investigation on different platforms simultaneously. So I can start, I don't know, I want to look at COVID, for instance. I can start this investigation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And then I have 4 data sets. And all the tools you can use on the database. It's a bit different from platform to platform. Some of them you can't post links, so some of them do have links and this kind of stuff. So the database per social media platform is a bit different. If you want more data, then you can feed in queries. Scraper farm will start again, and then you can actually do this. We have 3 models. Either we train a client in use, we only give them a subscription to the software, or we can execute projects for this client, or we have this hybrid model where we do projects together. So people from client, our people. We do this for media companies, so we make TV programs. We do it for newspapers in the Netherlands. We work for universities, think tanks, but we also work for companies like NATO, and now we're working for the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, for instance. Paid projects was we're really a startup. We started building somewhere mid-2019, but the paid project started basically on the 1st of January last year. But we do have a, like, I don't know, 8-year track record in doing this kind of investigation. This is a bit too detailed. I already explained it a bit. Elasticsearch, Kibana, Python, Jupyter, etc. we use, and we made a lot of AI. I think you've all seen these pictures of a person, but the person does not exist, right? It's AI generated, and it looks like a real person. Sometimes you see real strange glitches, like, I don't know, a part of glasses is missing or whatever. But we built, for instance, AI to locate people with a profile picture made by this person does not exist, or some other company that makes this kind of stuff. So at some point, we ran, like, there are about 2 million Dutch users on Twitter, and we ran the whole database of all the users, and we had all this whole list of these AI pictures. And interesting thing is that if you use network analysis, then you can actually see that it's like an army. They cooperate, push the same news, sometimes the same text, or they use the same bit.ly links. If I make a bit.ly link and you make a bit.ly link, it should be different. But if all the trolls use the same bit.ly links, that means that one person started it, sent it to all, I don't know, accounts, but it's actually an attack often. Yeah, this is also an interesting one. We started doing investigations on Instagram, which uses pictures, of course, and a lot of these pictures have text in it. And if I scrape some account and I have 2,000 of these pictures, and I would have to look at manually, like, what is the text in the picture? You can't search for it. I mean, it's in the picture. What we did, we built AI which strips all the text regardless of language, so we can run 120 languages on a lot of these platforms. It strips all the original text, so in this case it's Arabic, but we also translate it automatically to whatever language you want, so English or Dutch or whatever. And then we can process thousands and thousands of pictures, not only on Instagram, but it's more useful for Instagram than for Twitter. And then you can find, I don't know, info in pictures. And at some point we found something which we thought was weird, some book title, and it showed us a picture, and the technology works really well. So there was a picture of somebody in front of his bookcase for some interview, and what the software did is it made a list of all the books in his bookcase. So if somebody sends me a picture of his bookcase, I can give you an automatic database of the books. I'll show a couple of examples. This was an interesting one. We were awarded by the Ministry of Internal Affairs to look at the elections in the Netherlands. There was the last year, March, so not the municipality elections, but the country elections. And we dug up a lot of troll farms. So we also noticed that there were Turkish troll farms, Azerbaijani troll farms, Eritrean troll farms, some Dutch and this kind of stuff. We found fake polls. Twitter said that they won't allow any advertisement of political parties on social media, but it was really strange because we found a lot of them. And in this case, all these platforms really acted very quickly. So Facebook, Twitter looked at whatever we had and immediately took care of it. So they deleted the ads, troll farms and this kind of stuff. So you can cooperate with these platforms. That's something I hope that will increase in a couple of years. This is a NATO project where we went in blank and looked at Lithuania. And the interesting thing, what we noticed was there were huge troll farms. And we found a lot more in the end, but the first troll farm we found was 13,000 Chinese accounts attacking Lithuania. And why? Because Lithuania had some sort of friendship bond with Taiwan, and these Chinese people didn't want this friendship bond. So this 13,000 army started attacking politicians on different social media platforms, etc. When we started looking, at some point we stopped. I don't know how many trolls we had, tens and tens of thousands on Twitter only. This is one where we asked the Dutch public to help. So if they found something weird, it's also related to investigating the elections. If they saw something strange, they could report it. We would look at it and send back the results or publish it. And in, I don't know, 2.5, 3 months, we had 4 TV shows, 8 radio programs, and like 35 newspaper articles. So the impact was quite heavy. We won a Sigma award recently, or not me, but KRO and CRV. They used our software for a program called Pointer. And they dug up an army of about 150 accounts. And what these trolls were doing, they were pressing anti-vax info, very large scale, but they were also threatening politicians, this kind of stuff. It was aired in May. You can still find it online. And it recently, 2 weeks ago, it won the European Sigma Award for data analysis. This is actually one of the coolest things because it's more like a sort of counter-propaganda thing. We used a lot of data to dig up anti-vax COVID propaganda. And the question from the Ministry of Health, the Dutch Ministry of Health, was at the end of 2020, they had 28% of people who had doubts about taking the vaccine. And you can imagine that if all those people, that 28% of Dutch population, which is roughly like 17 million, would not take this vaccine, then you would have a very high percentage of people dying in the end, more than the people who would be vaccinated, of course. So they said, we want to bring it down. And we looked at a way how to do this. If we dig it up and we find all the groups, who these people are pushing this, what the narratives are, etc., then you can run campaigns, make movies, change websites of governments, etc., and address these things, and then you can bring it down. It took 2.5 months, and we brought it down from 28 to 10%. So that was very successful. Vaping, also as you see a lot of accounts appearing on social media pushing electronic cigarettes, and probably why is because people who start vaping, at some point a percentage of these people, I don't know the exact percentage, will switch to real cigarettes. We did this for this French paper, Le Monde, together with a Dutch company here in Amsterdam called the Investigative D. We train people in different countries. This is for NATO. We train Ukrainian journalists. Here in Amsterdam, they stopped now. Maybe it will continue at some point. The municipality of Amsterdam used our software past 1.5 years to also do data analysis on social media, not only related to propaganda, by the way. This is an interesting example because there was a story on the front page of a newspaper called Telegraaf, and they said the mayor of Hilversum is a Twitter troll. So apparently this guy, what their claim was, he's in an attic somewhere attacking local politicians. And I read it, and I thought, like, I didn't know him personally, but I know the person from, I don't know, TV and whatever. And I thought it was more like sort of psychology, I guess, that I thought, like, no way that this guy is in an attic. So we started an investigation, took like 1 hour, and then we found that it was not him. What they had done was reverse the password forgot, and it seemed to be the email address of this mayor. So, but it was actually somebody else. You get a lot of stars in the email address, and it turned out to be an employee of some botanical garden who used to take care of this botanical garden. And he was very upset that his funds were decreased and he couldn't properly maintain this botanical garden. We called the guy, he admitted, but that could have been a lot of political damage for this mayor. People were already talking that he had to stop his work and this kind of stuff. Schiphol was interesting. Somebody claimed that there were armed people with knives in a cockpit. There was a hijacking going on, this kind of stuff. And when we started pulling in a lot of data, it turned out that somebody pushed the wrong button. So it was false alarm, actually. But the amount of propaganda that started was bizarre. And some local newspapers took it over. And you can actually have a panic. So we can also, in some case, we can look at war situations, terrorist situations, and analyze this. And we were 1 hour ahead of the Dutch coordinator for terrorism, the NCTV, funny enough. Let me see, that's not interesting. That is also a silly one, took me 20 minutes. It's a Dutch politician, he claimed that some of his friends were harassed in a train. And I looked at it and I found the actual conductor because he posted on Instagram something about this. And he said, I'm not Moroccan. I called the guy and I put it on my Twitter, not even published. And it's I don't know, 2-3 weeks, it was in the media and even in the newspaper Guardian. So that shows really how powerful these investigations on social media platforms can be. How to find that it's really a troll RB? And this is a Polish one, it's also a publication in the Guardian. It's a Polish troll farm. They were actually, funny enough, financed by the European Union, so they got like 350,000 euros of subsidy. And they call themselves PR agency, but if I would call, or maybe not anymore, but at that time, if I would call, like, I hate some Polish politician, I'll pay you whatever, then they would start attacking this person with their Twitter accounts. Together with a Polish specialist, we managed to find the accounts. So on the right in the circle diagram, you see these people. And how we knew instantly that this is a troll farm, the graph on the left, the top left, 1 to 7 is the days of the week. And then from 0 to 23, that's the hours of the day, of course. And then you can see that they only work basically in the mornings on weekdays. But all of them, all accounts, I can't remember how many, there were like 30 or whatever, don't work in the weekends. So that shows the 2 hours of pulling in data, and I didn't need any more proof that this is really a troll army. If you would look at 30 people random on Twitter, some of them would tweet on Saturdays. You can look at a lot more different things than this. I think something went wrong, but I'll tell it by, this is not a presentation that I emailed, or I did email something strange. But I know it from the top of my head, and that was actually in the Wall Street Journal. I found these trolls in St. Petersburg before Twitter published them. And one thing they did, and it's really a Dutch thing, that what made it so interesting. I spent a lot of years investigating MH17, this crash, not only geolocating stuff, but really what these troll farms were doing. And I had a lot of these trolls, but Twitter deleted them, and they published a data set of 9 million tweets. And what we did is we made a graph. This troll army started somewhere in 2013, and they ended when this was deleted somewhere in 2018. And the total data set was 9 million tweets. So we had this database, we imported it, and we used Python to make a graph of all the days they were doing certain campaigns. So there was something political going on. Then you see this peak, the number of tweets on the y-axis. And when we made this graph, there was one insane peak, and that was 18th of July 2014. That was the date when Russia shot down this flight MH17, Malaysian flight 17. So what we did is we isolated that data. So we took the day it was downed and a couple of days after it, and then we looked at this data set. And most of the tweets were on MH17. But the day it was shot down was like, at the local time it was shot down was 16:20. So they started talking maybe like half an hour after the crash. It takes time for this troll farm or anyone on the planet to realize that it was a commercial airliner that was shot down. And at first, these trolls said the same thing, funny enough, all these Russian trolls, so located in St. Petersburg in a big office. There were about 400 of these trolls. Some of them had 20, some of them had 40 of these accounts. And what we noticed was they used a lot of hashtags to promote. So you can also use hashtags as a sort of network analysis tool. But that evening, they said the same thing that everybody on the planet said. They said the separatists in Donetsk shot down this airplane. They even mentioned this Strelkov, who's now the #1 suspect in this court case, which is still ongoing. Then we we took aside all the tweets with this specific hashtags. There were 3 of them. Kiev shot down Boeing, Kiev tell the truth or something. There were 3 of these hashtags. Then we ended up with 65,000 tweets, which started at 11 the day after the downing. So that was the 18th of July 2014, and it stopped exactly 24 hours later. And in total, there was 65,000 tweets, and the only thing that this army did was blame Ukraine, basically. But that was interesting, because the day before of downing, they said the same thing that everybody was saying on the planet. They pointed at these so-called separatists. And then the next day, they basically changed 100% to Ukraine shot it down. It was also published as a podcast for Bellingcat, and it won some international prizes, and it was later put in the Guardian, for instance. So to wrap it up, I mean, what I already said, like 6 years ago, a lot of people were basically saying like, it makes no sense, it's not really a problem, this info, etc. And I think now we see that it is a problem. Another famous example, I think, is when Trump said, I won the elections, and a couple of hundred people ran into this Capitol. There were 4 people who died in the Capitol, 200 people wounded. It was, some people call it some sort of coup d'etat even. But it was also created because of propaganda. He didn't win the elections. I don't think anybody believes that. They just try to make it seem like this. So COVID and these kinds of things, and especially now this war in Russia and the Russian war in Ukraine, you see huge amounts of this info, and suddenly probably the market is 10 times bigger now for this kind of work. People understand that it is really dangerous, that it really is a threat to your society. So. Yeah, I have a couple. I wanted to end 5 minutes before my time. I had half an hour. I wanted 5 minutes. I hope that some people have questions.
Oh, we've already got a question here. Yeah, can you pass over the microphone? Right in the middle there. Yep.
have a question about that I'm seeing more and more that personal opinions are being removed online as being disinformation. And also I believe that propaganda, whether it's a war or an election, it's from both sides. And it seems that most of the propaganda that's being addressed is more leaning towards one side. So as a citizen, I have a bit of a concern when it comes to freedom of speech and having access to all information to make up my own mind. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on this and how do you see the future developing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's always propaganda on both sides. And I mean, we all have freedom of speech, I hope, very high up in our standards. With this kind of work, we don't touch freedom of speech. So we look at really heavy troll farms. There's one company or one person behind it. And I think everybody agrees that this is more than just, I don't know, somebody who's either with an anonymous or not anonymous account pushing this info. So we stay very far away from this freedom of speech. I know that sometimes strange stuff is deleted, and I have doubts about whether this is always being done properly by different social media, but it's very different on different social media platforms. But sometimes rules are broken. I mean, if you, I don't know, tell that that we're going to die by COVID, this kind of stuff on YouTube. At some point, YouTube said we're fed up with all this propaganda on COVID, so they removed all this stuff. Maybe that was actually, for your society, a good move. But it's a very thin threshold. You need to be able to maintain your freedom of speech without removing this. But it's growing. I mean, in the Netherlands, we did a very big data analysis, and a lot of this propaganda, of course not only COVID, because that only existed like 2 years, but a lot of this propaganda online started 6.5 years ago. And what we did is we analyzed millions of tweets related to COVID, and then we made a sort of plot with the date of when the accounts were created. And then we saw that all accounts on some topic pushing propaganda fell in the left part first 6.5 years, and before that there were not these propaganda accounts. I think at some point you need to do something, because it's getting worse and worse and worse, and normal people are also affected by this. That's what makes it so difficult. And these social media platforms often do not act. I would be the person, if they would let me only show the troll farms I have, I would bring down the number of Twitter users quite significantly, probably. I even offered it to Twitter, got no reply whatsoever, but it's a stock-listed company. So the moment that you bring down significantly the number of users, then the company loses money, because on the stock market, their share will decrease. I hope at some point that there will be better cooperation, and maybe EU would need some legislation on this.
So I have a perhaps somewhat related question. Maybe it touches on this, but who sets the parameters? I mean, if I say Holland is a sunny country, that's clear, that's disinformation. There's got to be grey area. Like, who is it that says, okay, this is disinformation? Like, who's doing that? Is it yours? Is it the people that contract you?
No, it's really the social media platforms. And the one mechanism that we've seen, which is really bizarre, is that we've seen that Russian trolls attack some, I don't know, journalists that they don't like. So they report it. But apparently on Twitter side, they don't fact check whether it's really disinfo. So they just look at the number of times it was reported, and it's deleted, and everybody's in shock, like there was nothing wrong with this person or the tweet, but he's gone now. That would be a question for the Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams, etc. But it's not being done properly.
No, I can imagine. I can imagine there's a lot of grey area, and that's my point.
Indeed.
Okay, we have time for one last quick question? Just in the front, this will be the last question. Yes, please.
Why is it so difficult? Hello. Why is it so difficult or so hard to use evidence of Trollrensics, as you call them, When serious cases occur, for example, during 2016, at the American elections, publicly they said that there were, how to say, Russian trolls and whatever who influenced the result. It's a serious, how to say, it's a serious thing to accuse somebody for something like that. Why didn't they prove that this has happened? Why is this so difficult? This is my question.
Well, they asked Twitter itself for evidence on Russian meddling. And you see that this St. Petersburg army was really pushing Brexit and meddling in the US. So that was evident, but there's a lot more. When I try to show it to, I try to show it to British authorities, American authorities, this kind of stuff, and they either don't pick up the phone or never answer, don't answer your emails, unfortunately. I think this is the I don't know, single persons, I don't know, somewhere in an attic pushing this stuff is already dangerous. But the moment that you do it on an industrial scale with tens or hundreds of thousands of these accounts, it's a serious danger for your democracy. But it's, I hope that something will be changed at some point. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have to cut it there. So please thank Robert. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you.